May I then invite the next speaker of the day, Dr. Sai Keskar. She is also a budding scientist. She did her doctorate from the Queensland University of Technology, and then later on from, and she is deeply involved in this development of this method in India. Dr. Sai Keskar, her presentation is glucose, fructose, and sucrose analysis and molasses by gas chromatography, a demonstrative session. Dr. Sai Keskar.
Thank you very much. A very happy new year to all. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to present about this method. So basically, we are going to learn about the analysis of fructose, glucose, and sucrose on GCFID. This is a ICUMSA official method, which is labeled GS74322. And I have just tried to establish this method in our lab. And we have done some process intermediates from clear juice to molasses using this method. And we have some observations. So my presentation will be on the GC part, and Dr. Nimbarkar will give the interpretation of both these methods and how they can be compared in his presentation after me. So first of all, what is this method? This is a method for, this is an official ICUMSA method for glucose, fructose, and sucrose analysis. And this is not just a method for molasses, but this has been designed for all intermediates, starting from cane juices, syrups to the final molasses. So this method has already been designed for everything that happens in the sugar industry. And it is designed beautifully, as we will see later. So we can trust this method without taking a lot of doubt on how we are going to implement it. The only thing we have to do is now implement it to our processes and see how do an extensive study on how this method will work on all of the intermediates or whatever we want to see. The principle of this method is silylation, and prior to silylation, there is also oximation of our sugar sample. So why are we oximating and silylating these sugar samples or molasses samples? So basically, GC gas chromatography, as you know, is something is a technique which only deals with volatile compounds. And in HPLC, it is easier to inject sugar without any derivatization because HPLC can handle non-volatile compounds, the water-soluble compounds. So silylation is a process of converting your sugars into something that is volatile. So it is called trimethyl silyl reagent, or TMS. So sugars are converted into volatile form by using this TMS reagent. And before silylating them, we actually oximate them in order to make sure that there are no undesirable derivatives of fructose in other sugars, which lead to the losses of our sugars. So the natural question is, why this method? Why are we using this method? The most important part is that this method is designed in a way that it incorporates two internal standards. Xylose for fructose and glucose, and trehalose for sucrose. Why internal standards are important is that chromatography is a technique where you can have varying in area and height day to day. It is not like spectrometry or the spectrophotometers you use in the lab, where you can calibrate them once in 15 days or once in 3 months and then keep using that slope again and again. In chromatography, what you have to do is every time you run samples, you have to calibrate again in order to get the most accurate results. So in this, sometimes there is always a peak shifting or area variation. So today you will get 3000 area for your xylose peak. Tomorrow you might get 3200. Although the variation is just 200 points, it does affect your overall results. What an internal standard does is that it will take away the variation, because with every run you will run an internal standard, and that way you will adjust, normalize your data, normalize your results based upon your internal standard. So this will take away any variation, day-to-day variation in your method. Secondly, this method is selective only for sugars. Like Madam said in the previous presentation, in Lane-Anon method, the term TRS refers to total reducing substances and not sugars. Most of the times, many people confuse that S with sugars. But in Lane-Anon method, it is substances. So there can be any other substances which reduce copper, which end up in your final titer. Here, this method is selective for sugars only, because you are silylating sugars only, and they are coming out at specific retention time. So you know that xylose is xylose, fructose is fructose, and sucrose is sucrose. The third point is that the titration method, as I said, cannot differentiate between sugars and other substances. Here, we can differentiate between sugars and other substances. We don't even see the other substances, so it is very, very selective towards sugars. Again, this method is designed to give final sugars as a percentage weight of the sample. So there is no complicated conversion that we are calculating in ppm, or we are calculating in some other unit and then we are converting it to percent, or based upon our weight. This method has already given us the parameters that you have to take 2 gram sample, and everything is going to come as a percent of your sample weight. The method also incorporates that in its design itself, laboratory controls for every analysis which are compared. So there is no chance that we are doing anything wrong, because we have our own controls which we make in the laboratory. We add specific amounts of sucrose, fructose, and glucose to water, and we process that exactly the way we process samples. So if our recoveries are good, that means that batch of our method has worked well. If our control recoveries are not good, if our standard recoveries and controlled recoveries don't match, then we have to repeat everything. So this method also gives you an idea whether your analysis has been accurate or not. So this is also one of the key points of why we should be choosing this method. So let us start. The first point point is sampling. As you all know, that sampling of molasses is the most crucial aspect of analysis. So since in the lab we work on only samples received from the factory, we have to set up proper sampling protocols on site also. So what we did is, in the laboratory, the samples are sonicated for 30 minutes in an ultrasonic bath at 40 degrees Celsius. So we make sure that every sample is can be stirred easily with a glass rod, and we do not sample until we get that molasses into that consistency. When we actually receive molasses has been graded into various sections. There are sediments settled down. It is not a homogeneous sample. So we make sure that we sonicate it enough to make it a homogeneous samples. Then this method requires 2 grams of sample. So we don't take 2 grams entirely from the main source of sample. That if we have received 1 kg of sample, we don't take 2 grams from the sample, but we keep sampling around 2 grams until we reach 10 grams from all areas of that beaker, and make sure that we take it from the bottom as well. And then we form a 10 gram subsample, and then we take 2 grams from that 10 grams. So we are also open to any more suggestions of how to improve this as well, if this is causing any variations in the results. So as far as the laboratory people are concerned, we are still on our learning curve in how molasses should be handled and sampled. We are not as good as the factory people to understand this matrix. So we will be willing to interact with more factory people in order to get more insight into this sampling. So each standard, we'll go into the method design now. I have given a snapshot of how the calibration standards are prepared. So here you can see mixed juice calibration standard and molasses calibration standard. Then mixed juice controls and molasses controls. So this method has already incorporated the amount of sucrose, xylose, and sucrose, glucose and fructose you will find in mixed juice, and that same quantity in molasses. So even the standards have been designed differently. So here each standard has a fixed quantity of xylose and trehalose. For both juice and molasses, the standards are designed as per the quantity of each sugar in the final product. So these are custom made standards. These are not just, we haven't decided that okay, this is good for sucrose and this is good for mixed juice or this is good for molasses. These have been designed by ICUMSA itself. A control is a laboratory standard made by adding known quantities of sucrose, glucose, and fructose in water. So here you can see mixed juice controls as well as molasses controls. So we have controls for each type of sample. And controls go through the process of extraction exactly like the samples, and hence indicate if there are any errors or deviations in the method. Like I said in the beginning, controls are run with every batch of samples. Then how we proceed with this is we prepare and accurately weighed standards first, like we have seen in the previous slide. Then we prepare our controls. Then we weigh sample and add two internal standards that we have seen in the first slide. Then we also add internal standards to the controls. Then there is an oximation of a step of samples where we add a reagent in pyridine, and we oximate our samples. Then we put them in the sonication bath for 20 minutes. Again, we pull them out. We simulate the samples, standards and controls, and then we leave them overnight. Then we analyze them on GCFID and calculate the response factors and data processing. So how does an internal standard work? Like I said, the internal standards xylose and trehalose are added because first of all, they would not be present in molasses and cane juice on their own in large amounts. That's why we have selected, the method has selected them. Hence, they make for a suitable internal standard. And like I said in the first slide itself, chromatographical measurements can vary in response with every analysis. An internal standard will eliminate these variations because its area is measured with every sample. And a typical response calibration curve is not needed in an internal standard method. Like we do not have to construct a calibration curve for sucrose, a separate calibration curve for glucose, and a separate calibration curve for fructose. We just calculate the response factors for each based on the internal standard, and we use those response factors for our samples. It is solely based on the response factors. That's why it is easier to handle, and there are less errors. So here you can see a slide where we have calculated the response of controls, the recovery of controls. So separately, fructose, glucose, sucrose in our controls has been calculated, and in sample what we have added you can see in the first column, and in sample by on GC, and in the fourth column you can see what we have added. So we have added 0.5 and we have recovered 0.51. We have added 0.50, again we have recovered 0.5. So the controls work very well in this method, and we have done them repeatedly over a long period of time. Then again we tested this method by analyzing invert syrup on it. We tried this method using invert syrup, and sure enough we found that there was no sucrose peak, and the addition of our other factors, that is glucose and fructose, came to 1%, approximately 1%. So this is how we slowly build confidence in this method. The main part of this method is that sucrose can be measured directly. Even if you do not want to know the content of fructose or glucose in your sample, just for sucrose, there is a different internal standard, which is trehalose. So even just for using, knowing how much sucrose your method has, you can use this method. So here I have given you graph of sucrose content from clear juice to the end, like the syrup stage. And here you can see beautifully how as the sucrose content increases and the Brix, they are very nicely correlated. So a direct sucrose measurement, even in your process intermediates, wherever you want to see where your sucrose is being lost, can be done using this method, not just for molasses, but also for your process study of sucrose recovery. Then here you can see in tables, and the clear juice is in green and the syrup is in orange. So we have done clear juice analysis using this method. You can see that fructose is 0.24, 0.34 glucose, 15.44 sucrose, and for the same sample, the syrup sucrose is also available, which is 56.12. So from mixed juice, from clear juice to syrup, the transition also can be studied using this method. How sucrose gets concentrated until the last point of your process. Now the important part, the most important part of this method is that before and after fermentation data. Here you can see two graphs overlaid, put one below the other. Those graphs are of the same sample, chromatograms are of the same sample. The top chromatogram is before fermentation. So before fermentation, you can see all the peaks. You can see sucrose, you can see xylose, fructose, glucose, and sucrose and trehalose. And the same sample, after fermentation, everything disappears. So except xylose, xylose and trehalose, there is nothing in that graph. So before and after data shows that sugars are consumed. So in fermentation, sugars will be consumed and the peaks will be lost. But yet in titration, you will always find some unfermentable value, which can be anywhere between 3 to 5%. Dr. Nimbarkar will elaborate on that. And this unfermentable is nothing but substances other than sugars, which will reduce copper and add to the titer. So this is a very important part of our study, that the actual data of sucrose in reducing sugars after fermentation and what you get from the titration has a difference, and that difference may be constant or may vary with different process intermediates. Like with molasses, it could be different, and with other process intermediates, it could be different. So here I have given actual values of before and after. So TRS before and TRS after, the first two columns are by titration. So you can see the TRS here is 49.52, and sugars by GC, it's 34 plus 3.5 plus 6.1. And here B heavy, TRS 59.7, and RS, and here you can see 52 plus 1.9 plus 2.1. Now after, here you can see 5.1 in final molasses, but here it's just 0.1 plus 0.6 plus 0.03. And here again B heavy, in B heavy you can see 2.5 unfermented in titration, but in GC it's just 0.2 plus 0.6 plus 0.05. So these are the differences that we have seen, which will be explained to you in the next presentation. Now I'll show you the video demonstration of this method. So here in this step, we are adding trehalose, which is our internal standard for sucrose, into our vials. And like I said, we have already made homogenized samples of molasses. And then in the next step, we will weigh the sample here. You can see that we are weighing sample, 2 grams of sample in a pre-weighed trehalose vial, where we have already measured 250 mg of trehalose. This sample will be, then xylose will be added to this sample, because xylose is the internal standard for glucose and fructose. So we add 100 mg of xylose to all our samples. This is the important first step, where we are adding both the internal standards to our samples. Then we take 5 microliter of this sample, very small quantity. We take 5 microliters from this prepared sample after stirring it properly, and 5 microliter of samples are taken in separate vials, another vials, labeled vials. Then In that 5 microliter sample, we add our oximation reagent, which is diethanolamine and pyridine. So in each of those vials, we will add 4.5, I think 0.5 ml of oximation reagent. The next step will be vortexing. I should tell everybody that between all these steps, even though videos are not present for all steps, we have always vortexed our samples. Even after addition of trehalose, we vortex it, then add xylose. After addition of xylose, we vortex it, then add the oximation reagent. So mixing of the sample at every stage is very critical. Then we add the trimethyl. Here you can see 1,1,1,3,3 hexamethyl disilazine, which is our silylating agent. It is also called HMDS. So we add 450 microliters of HMDS to all our vials so that the silylation takes place. And for this silylation, trifluoroacetic acid, which is TFA, is also needed. Which is also needed. So we add TFA as well. Then we vortex the batch again and we sonicate it. Here you can see this is the chromatogram on GC of all our analytes. Here from 8 to 10 or 8 to 12, you can see xylose, fructose and glucose. And from 18 to 20 or about 17.5 to 20, you can see sucrose and trehalose. So I'll just play this so that if you can't hear it, you can just observe how they are in the zooming. So here, as everybody saw, that the trehalose and sucrose peaks are equal in height, almost equal in height, and xylose and fructose glucose are almost equal in height. So they have also matched the scale of our analytes in each sample, assuming that a clear juice may have this much amount of fructose and glucose and this much amount of sucrose. So because they are of same height and almost similar in nature, it is easier to use them as internal standards and errors are eliminated.
There is a question from Dr. Keskar, that is the unfermentable sugar, directly in which method to use check. And there is another question, that is, as per presentation from Dr. V.S. Keskar, Lane and Eon method is overestimating the results of TRS by 3 to 4%. Shall we understand if TRS is 50% in lab analysis, then actually it is 46 to 47%, considering overestimation?
So there is no thumb rule. The variation is different from sample to sample. I have given only lowest and highest values.
Okay, ma'am. And ma'am, there is another question, that is HPLC coupled with RI can be better or not? Which will LPLC method is simpler or GCFID? Can GC be coupled with RI detector for accuracy?
No, GC will not be coupled with RI detector. RI detector is for HPLC, and here we are using FID detector.
And actually, you can use HPLC RI for this method. There is another Tecumseh method for that as well, but we cannot. But it has to be internal standard enabled in order to be reliable. Because
we move forward to another question.
Somebody has asked about the make of the GC.
Yeah.
So it is Agilent make FID.
Okay.
FID.
And ma'am, you can take question from Mr. Sri Hari Dharmadhikari, that is difference shown before fermentation and after fermentation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is helpful, but we also need to consider the time taken for test, as biological reaction will remain continue in the sample till biological cells are there. No, but this is not about just biological cells being present in the sample. We have fermented the sample at the same time, and the same sample, two aliquots were taken, one for Leninon method and one for GC method. So we, after fermentation, the same sample was analyzed at the same time by two different methods. So we haven't really analyze one at a different time and one at the different time.
Okay, ma'am. And there is another, can you please explain interpretations of the last slide of your PPT, in which you have given a data table for before and after fermentation? And
Okay.
another question is, can we use this GC for analyzing pure alcohol?
Yeah, we can use a GC. FID is actually very popular for analyzing pure alcohol only. In fact, this method is a new concept on GC.
Okay. And
2 gram sample taken was undiluted. Yeah.
And there is another, that is what is the cost of GC that we.
A cost of GC can 10 to 15 lakhs is the basic you can get, and you don't have to buy Agilent also. Even local indigenous brands make GC.
Okay, ma'am.
You only need a capillary column, so but that is a one-time investment, and you can use it for 2, 3, or even 5 years. Detector FID.
Okay, and how much time will be taken for one test? That is the last question.
So it is, like I said, it is overnight. You have to leave the samples overnight. So if you bring the samples in today, ideally if you work very hard and everything is ready, then tomorrow you can get the results.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. And sir, we can now move forward to another presentation.
Just
and last slide, there was one question where they wanted a detailed explanation of that slide, where I had given before and after data, but you will see a better interpretation in Dr. Nimbalkar's presentation after this, and he will explain it better than it is explained in this slide.
Dr. Sai Keskar, I have a small question.
Yeah.
Samples you analyze are as delivered in your lab in Pune.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if the factories have to ship the samples to you, they may get, there may be some deterioration during the transit time. So
yeah, for this, we can freeze the samples.
What protocol you have given for ensuring the sample?
Freezing. Yeah, freezing the samples on site and then transporting them will work.
The freezing and then transport, how with
we have done it, we had insulated boxes and we have transported, we have frozen them on site, and then we have transported and then put them in our cold storage. And we were working on those samples for 1 or 2 months after that.
So which means you have to specify the protocol also, how the sample should be brought from the factory or to your lab.
Yes.
Okay.